goodness. Please welcome our speaker today, Tamesia Garner.
Ladies and gentlemen of AARP, I know we all remember that fateful day when we started getting the literature in our mailboxes. We're going, oh no, it can't be time for that. Oh, but then we opened those letters up and we found out the great benefits that there are to being a member of AARP. And I see you have quite a vibrant group gathered here today, and it is my honor to come and speak to you. I am a native Houstonian. I grew up in Houston, Texas. I went to college in Houston, Texas. I've worked in Houston, Texas, and I've worked other places, but as you can see, I came back home. Houston is home. And the reason it's home is that it's where my family settled during the Depression. They left other parts of Texas and came here because opportunity was in Houston. Houston is still the land of opportunity. I come to you today to actually talk about some issues that are very relevant to you as sandwich generation. You're in this place where you're still taking care of your children, your adult children, but now your parents are getting older and they're having issues with their life, with either financially or they've got illnesses and health issues, and you're just caught in that tug all the time of where to put your energy and your resources. And I came here today really to try to encourage you, but to also give you some information that might help you work through this time of being in the sandwich generation. I grew up with ill family, older family, and as Kim said in my introduction, I remember taking my grandmother to her doctor's appointments when I was in college. It was not unusual for me to get out of class and get in the car, go home, pick up my grandmother and go to the podiatrist or her doctor, and it was a blessing to be able to do. But then at this age that I am now, if I had to still do that, if my parents, which I do have family who are in their 80s now, it becomes a whole another ball game because it's more severe. You never know when it'll be the last time that you take them to the doctor. So we're going to talk about some things today. Number one, wills. We're going to talk about having a will. But we're also going to talk about end of life matters. I entitled the speech, End of Life Matters, because the end of life matters. And there are things that we can do. I call it family business. There are things that we can do to deal with these end-of-life matters, these decisions that must be made that we don't want to make, but the time comes when we have to make them. So I'm going to take a quick poll of the room. Who has a will? Okay. Who has a will that they've looked at in the last 5 years? Very good. Who has a will that's had to make any changes to their will in the last 3 years? Very good. I was talking to my 88-year-old stepfather the other day, and he just now snapped, well, I just lost 2 sons this year. I need to rewrite my will. Now, you can do a codicil and you can make changes easily like an amendment, but he's decided he wants to rewrite his will. One of the things I want to suggest, even if you're single, even if you don't have any children, I'm single and I have no children, but I have this Honda that I drive every day, and it has a title to it. And that title has to change once I'm no longer here, because I can't own a car if I'm not living. And it's a stress and it's a strain on any heirs I might have, my nephew, to get that title changed if I don't have a will. It's as simple as that. Everyone should have a will, and it can be a very simple will. I'll tell you the first time I wrote a will, I walked out of the funeral for a under 40-year-old man, Vietnam vet, who had an accident in his home and died. He just was that quick. He was at the Veterans Cemetery. I got in my car, I drove to Brookside Memorial Cemetery, and I prearranged my funeral. But I didn't have a will, and I knew that's another thing I needed to do. We can't let it's not fair to our loved ones left behind to not be prepared. Dave Ramsey talks about something called a legacy drawer, and I think it's brilliant. In the legacy drawer, you put all the pertinent information, account information, different trusts that you might be involved in, any kind of 401ks, investments, any property matters that you might have. You have just a whole list of this, because the person that comes behind you may not know anything about your situation, may have no clue where the will is. When my aunt died, I couldn't find the will. I knew it existed, I had read it, but I couldn't find it. It was in a paper box instead of the locked, fireproof file cabinet. So these are important things to know, but if everything's in a legacy box and everybody knows this is where everything is, and that's the other thing I want to mention to you. I have suggested this to friends before. Thanksgiving Day, get everyone, that's all the family, the children, the whatever, the old folks, young folks, everybody around the table, read the will. That way somebody can't say, well, that's not what Grandpa wanted. Read the will, pass out the masking tape and the Sharpies, and say, okay, go after it, whatever you want, put your name on it, because then there'll be no fighting later. I don't know how many of you have been through end of life situations with people, but folks come out of the woodwork. Everybody, the in-laws, the outlaws, everybody comes out of the woodwork because they think there's something there. They want the something. It's really sad to say. I'm just telling you, I've seen it happen. Actually experienced a bit of it. Get a will, settle it with the court. I was in paralegal school and we were sitting there on a field trip at the probate court. And this young woman walks forward with a young child, about 8 years old, and proceeds to tell the judge that she's not really here to probate. There's no will to probate. She just wants her couch back because her boyfriend was murdered. And his family was in charge of all of his estate. And they weren't giving her couch back. So it could be as simple as that. If you had a will, the deceased that had a will, we wouldn't be in court that day. Have a will. And I can tell you the reason that you want to have a will and the problems that you will find is that at the end of life, some things go so quickly that you don't have time to even think about it. It's really the last thing on your mind. This year I've lost 2 brothers in 5 months. And we had to make end-of-life decisions for them because they financially weren't able to. One brother was real simple. We did a cremation for him. I was able to actually prearrange his cremation before he actually deceased. Made a phone call. Things were handled. It was a real blessing. I personally, like I said, I had gone and made my own prearranged funeral. Brought a lot. I had everything ready to go. I have since decided that I want to donate my body to science because I just think that cadavers are important in the medical field and that students need them to study to become better doctors. So what am I going to do with this prearranged funeral? When my youngest brother died in June, we ended up using it for him. And let me tell you, it was a nice funeral. I really selected some really nice things. They let me change out the casket, thankfully, because it was originally going to be a mauve color. This was the 80s that I chose this, just more of a steel blue. And he had red hair. He looked just gorgeous. It was just so amazing. Such a difficult thing to go through. And then when we got to the cemetery for the burial, the actual, I don't remember buying this container. It was much nicer than I remember picking out. And it had his name on it and some praying hands. And I'm going, hey, this is really nice. He's really having a nice funeral. One of the reasons that you want to prearrange these things is because it's cheaper to do so. My stepfather, I should say, prearranged his cremations, and they were like 3 times more expensive than cremations are now. But for a burial, what I paid $3,800 for was now worth over $10,000. I didn't have to pay a dime. My lot that I had purchased for $600 cash off of of just an advert in a penny paper is now worth over $2,500. Pre-arrange now, it will save you money. The other thing about pre-arranging is that you don't have to make those decisions. You're not going to be here, first of all, to make those decisions. I mean, that's a hard thing to say. But if you have definite things that you want done, you can put instructions in this legacy drawer. You can put instructions about your funeral, the hymns you want sung. I found out that one of my brothers wanted Freebird played at his service, and I had no idea. I had no idea. But we played it. Yes, we did. But that was his wishes, and that's what you want to do. You want to honor someone at that time. It's a difficult thing to go through, but we want to do these things and make our lives so much easier and make things go so much more smoothly. I know when one of my brothers died, it was a total sudden. It was total sudden. We didn't expect it at all. You know, with older folks, you have some time and you prepare through that grief. Grief is different for everyone. But it's good if we can just have that little measure of just comfort to know that these decisions have already been made. The last thing I want to talk about also has to do with end-of-life matters. One of my brothers had been diagnosed with really a terminal condition. And in the course of about 3-4 months, his condition deteriorated quite a bit. One day I got a phone call saying he just told us to take all the tubes, take all the feeding tubes, take all the medications. He didn't want to do any more of this. He had decided to go into palliative care, which was his decision to make. So I went down and I had to sign this form to say that I am now his power of attorney for his health care decisions. Something I wasn't really prepared to do. He and I hadn't really talked about it. When the palliative care team comes in, this could be 2 days, this could be 2 weeks. We don't know how long. Just taking him off of food, taking him off of medication, but giving him medication so he's comfortable. In the state of Texas, we do not have something called a dignity with death law. The state of Oregon has been the place where, that was the original place where death by dignity has been put together. And having come through this experience with one of my brothers, he lasted a whole week. And I just remember him almost every day. After the 3rd day, he kept asking me, Tammy, why am I still here? Why am I still here? Because he was so sick. His heart was just in the process of stopping. And as I've gone through that, for someone who is ready to die, not someone who wants to die, someone who's ready to die, I just think that it might be something to consider. And it's something I want to suggest to you today as an alternative, perhaps. It's very important to understand what death by dignity laws are about. They are called physician-assisted suicide, but in effect, the physician only writes a prescription. Physician does not administer the medication to cause the death. The individual makes the decision. You must be obviously over 18 of legal age. You have to be a citizen of a state that has this right, which right now, California, Colorado, Washington State, mostly on the West Coast, Vermont, Washington, D.C., Montana has a law that is mandated not through legislation, but through a court decision, and Hawaii has one taking effect in 2019. So it's very limited where you could even exercise this option. The state of Texas obviously does not have such a thing. And it's not like you can just fly into California and say, I want to have death by dignity. You have to be a registered citizen. You have to prove your citizenship in that state. You also have to understand that there are like two different hearings you have to go through. There are multiple layers of how the decision is made. And it's really, the thing I think that drives it for me is the statistic that 25 to 27% of the health care benefits paid by Medicare are paid out for folks in the last 6 months of their lives. With the death by dignity, if you were given a terminal diagnosis for the last, and it's going to be within 6 months, you qualify for death by dignity in people that have laws like the state of Oregon. It's not for everybody. It's not a decision that everyone would want to make. But again, I think it should be an option. Again, the other thing that I found out is that not everyone, as a matter of fact, only 1/3 of the folks that get the prescription, pick up the prescription, actually ever use it. I don't know, I'm sure there's some other statistical reasons why that didn't happen. Maybe they died before they could ingest the medications that cause the death. But the point I'm trying to make, I think it's a very merciful option. At least it would have been in my situation. It's an ethical question. I'm not going to argue that. It's a bioethical question for everyone. But today, I just wanted to talk to the sandwich generation. And I wanted to let you know that there are things that we really need to think about. There are what we call the family business. I was very grateful that my aunt, who raised me, took me, when my grandfather died, took me into the room while they were making the decisions. When my grandmother died, I was actually on the couch where I could see and hear everything. When my uncle died, I sat at the table with her, went into the casket room. Now that'll freak you out the first time you do that. So then when she died, I knew exactly what she wanted. I didn't have to think that I wasn't honoring her wishes. But as you go through this time, it might be that one of your children might need. You might have to think about some of these things for your children. It's a difficult subject to talk about. I apologize. I really don't apologize for that. But I bring it to you today for your consideration. First of all, get a will. It's important that you get a will that is verified in the state that you live in. Don't just go to Office Depot and pick up one of those pre-made, because they've got them for every state in the union. You want to get one that's done for Texas. And it'll be the best $200 you ever spent, I have to tell you. It really, really will be in the long run. Second of all, think about, what do you want? What are your end-of-life choices? Because end-of-life matters. Our lives, we work hard all of our lives. We pour ourselves into our children, into our families, into our communities, into the things that we take interest in. Why do we just leave these decisions to other people? Take a little control. I know we're all control freaks in this room, but because we wouldn't be in the sandwich generation if we weren't. We're having to make these decisions anyway. Let's make them ahead of time. And if you find yourself in a situation where one day you have to make a decision, or someone else has made a decision, like my family member made a decision, I really couldn't help with it. My hands were tied in the state of Texas. We don't have a death with dignity law. I appreciate talking to you today. It's been my joy. It's been my peace to live through these things and try to share just a little information and maybe encourage you a bit to take these matters to mind, because end of life matters.